Right, my name's Dave Eldergill and I'm an artist based here in Somerset. And as an artist, I'm concerned with finding ways to articulate the connection between personal memories and a shared cultural history. My practice considers the universal life experiences that connect us, the journey from birth, life and death, and the signposts that mark the way in between. And experiences which are seemingly unique, personal, intimate, but I think have a resonance with everyone. So I'd like to talk a little bit about this work, but I'm quite conscious not to say too much and to give a prescribed meaning to the work and run the risk of closing down any potential alternative readings, but rather allow or encourage people to maybe bring their own understanding to the work. But in saying that, I think it would be useful for me to give some context to my art practice and maybe give a way into understanding some of the thoughts and ideas that have led me to make this particular body of work. So I'm going to screen a video piece called the INFIRMARY TRIPTYCH. And it's a project which up to now has been about 18 months in the making. And the research so far has been a really interesting and rewarding journey. So as part of that research, I have written an article for the Derby Nurses League magazine and attended their reunion meeting in Derby. I've talked to nurses who trained in Derby in the 1930s onwards. I've seen the artefacts, mementos, photographs from a time spent nursing, a time when nursing was a vocation and each working day began with prayers. One of the ex-nurses now lives in a retirement home quite near here in Cheddar, and it was fascinating to talk to her about her experiences of working at the Royal Infirmary during the war years. I've made visits to see a stained glass window that was in the hospital chapel and is now housed in an inner city church in Derby. And I've looked around the empty and boarded up old hospital building and reimagined the ghosts of the past on the now decaying wards and corridors. And that for me was a very poignant and moving experience. So this project began when I was visiting friends in Derby in 2013, and I walked past the old hospital in the city centre. Now the main part of the hospital closed in 2009 and everything moved to a brand new hospital on the outskirts of the city. So I took some photos on my phone as I walked by the boarded up and fenced off building, and I felt a real sense of nostalgia for the place. But nostalgia is quite a dangerous place for an artist to visit, with its associations of twee sentimentality. And yet, it's this connection with the past which is an essential part of the work that I make. So it's quite a difficult line to walk. And hospitals as well can be places where all human emotion is played out. Places of great tragedy, places of great hope. And also in a sense that hospital is a metaphor for those intimate, personal, and yet universal experiences that we all share. And for me, there was the personal connection because it's where I trained back as a nurse in the 1980s. And the experiences I had when I was training and subsequent time working there are experiences which, with hindsight, have been very formative to who I am as a person, but also, therefore, who I am as a nurse, as an artist. Freudian slip there. So, the video piece that I've made is presented as a triptych. And I have to say a big thank you to Richard and Somerset Film for all the help with the editing and putting this on. Well done. The form of triptych has a really rich history within the traditions of religious art. And originally would have been a devotional artwork consisting of 3 panels, often with the panels being hinged so the outer sections could close over the middle section. A very common form of altarpiece from the medieval period onwards. And the form, together with the subject matter and the content of the painted panels, was as much part of the meaning of the work as the subject matter and the content. But it's a form which moved beyond the traditional altarpiece and includes things like Francis Bacon's triptychs, the scenes from the figures at the base of the crucifixion. But also, especially I think for me, Bill Viola's video work, the Nantes triptych. Bill Viola is often considered to be one of the father figures of video art. And he did this seminal work back in 1992. And a central video has a man floating underwater, fully clothed in a black pool, and is flanked on the left by a film of a young woman giving birth, and on the right by an old woman in the process of dying. The artist had used real events for those side panels. The birth film was filmed in a natural childbirth clinic in California, and the other film was one that he'd shot of his mum actually dying, which he'd done as a way of artistically coming to terms with the death of his own mother, and then years later used it as part of this triptych. The art critic Oliver Lussac described the central image as being projected onto a translucent cloth, stretched in front of an empty white room, forming an indistinct luminous cloud of light behind and beyond the surface of the image. The projected image of the body underwater hovers in midair, part material, part immaterial, and held in a fragile suspension before an indistinct, shadowy space between birth and death. So my work is not only a response to Renaissance altarpieces, but also to more recent interpretations of this form. I think also I would like to say a little bit about the religious iconography that I've used in this work, not only in the form of triptych, but also in the content of the stories that are being told. I feel that we have within our culture a deep historical relationship with a Christian meta-narrative, a familiarity with its forms and its structures. Before I started the research for this project, I'd never read anything from the Book of Common Prayer. Sentences like ashes to ashes and dust to dust, or dearly beloved, we are gathered here today, are very, very common. And they've been an integral part of the cultural landscape which I inhabit. Through the milestone events in life, such as births, marriages and death, which this work references, and through the consumption of film, television and various media, these familiar forms of that Christian meta-narrative constitute something of the fabric of the culture which informs who I am. So I want to look at the film, which are in essence 3 individual narratives. They combine to make a whole, presented in a very contemporary art format of a video projection, and yet standing very much on the shoulders of a long tradition of devotional religious art. And that's it. Let's play the film.